Hi, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Scott.
And welcome to the God or Not podcast, where truth springs from argument among friends. This is episode number 10. And coming up, Scott and I will be talking about Christmas. Also in this episode, the crowd goes wild. So grab your popcorn, sit back, and enjoy the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the center ring. This is the God or Not podcast. We're in for a great night of civil discourse here as these two warriors are revved up and ready to go. And now, let's get ready to dialogue!
Christmas time. Christmas time.
'Tis the season.
Yes, it is. It's snowing here in Columbus, Ohio. Well, there's at least snow on the ground. Yeah. How about you? Snow?
Yeah.
Dusting. Probably compared to you.
It doesn't really snow there, apparently.
Right.
No, we've
had
had snow.
Dusting.
We've had snow on the ground
since April.
A month. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Right.
It actually came a little early this year. There's been several of the last few years we've been snowless, even this late, even towards the new year. But this year and last year, and I think maybe even the year before, we've had some earlier snows. It's not unheard of to have snow on Halloween.
Yeah, you know what? That
it's not
happened
all that
a few
common,
years
but it
ago
does
for
happen.
us.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to have snow for Christmas anyhow. I think that makes it a little festive. But,
I love it when it snows. I just like it's very relaxing.
Christmas. Yeah, after Christmas, I could take it or leave it. But
right.
For Christmas time, anyhow, speaking of Christmas time, that's what we're going to be talking about today. We are going to be all over the place, pulling some stuff out of some stockings, some topics, and just all over the place with Christmas.
A veritable grab bag of Christmas extravaganza.
Extravaganza. It's like the Dollar Tree of podcasting. You just go down the aisles and...
I was like, a Dollar Tree? Where?
You never heard of the Dollar Tree?
Is that like
where everything
one of those
is
dollar stores?
Legitimately
Okay.
a dollar? Yeah,
right.
It's not like the Dollar General where it's like $5 and $10 items in there. No.
Okay.
The Dollar Tree.
Gotcha.
Everything in there's $1, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So a virtual grab bag of dollar.
Why do I feel like you just insulted me somehow? I don't think you did, but it's
no, but those are the best. Those are the
Mm-hmm.
best ones when you're not sure.
Right. I have to dissect that later on.
So we do have a couple of announcements before we get going on our Christmas episode.
Mm-hmm.
And one of which is interesting. We're going to start this new kind of book readers club. Scott, why don't you fill our listeners in on kind of what we'll be doing there?
Sure. Well, we're going to try it out. We're going to see how it goes. And so Jamie and I wanted to read a book together. All right. And we're going to do it twice. The first time I'm going to pick the book, and then the second time Jamie's going to pick the book. And we thought we would maybe talk about it every episode, for the next several episodes. And so, and that way, if any of our listeners wanted to follow along with us, and then they could contribute. And so basically what's going to happen is on January 7th, we're going to start. That's going to be our next episode, our first episode of the new year of 2020.
Huh.
And so then we'll say, okay, we're starting now, and then we'll read the first X number of chapters until the next episode. So I guess so we'll start on January 7th, and then on the following episode, which will be on January 21st, that's when we'll talk about the first few chapters.
Right.
So if any, and we'll talk about it again when we get to the 7th, but if anybody wants to chime in, if you want to send in your thoughts on the chapters and some comments or questions or conundrums or anything you want to contribute, we're hoping to collect a little bit of some listener feedback, and
We'd love to get some Christian listener feedback too. Listen, I've been getting my face kicked in with some atheists. That nice enough people. Nonetheless, still getting my face kicked in.
Well, so maybe that's good. Maybe you're riling them up. Maybe that's right. It. Maybe that's
smacking the bee's nest.
Yeah, that might be it. Yeah.
Why don't you tell our listeners and myself, because I'm going to be hearing this too tonight for the first time. Why don't you tell us what book we're all going to be reading?
Yeah, so the book we're going to be reading, and I chose this especially for Jamie, and this is called Sense and Goodness Without God, A Defense of Metaphysical Naturalism. And it's by a historian and philosopher by the name of Richard Carrier. And that's it. And that's the book we're going to read. And I chose it for Jamie because, Jamie, you've been just itching for as long as I've known you for, give me a defense of naturalism. And so
defend your position, Scott.
But I do want to say that this will be interesting for me too, because Carrier goes a little bit further than I do as far as he's making a defense of metaphysical naturalism, which assumes that there just is no supernatural.
Yeah.
We've talked about how, for me, it's more of a methodological issue. We don't really have the tools to explore the supernatural at this point. And so it's more of a practical limitation from my perspective. But what Carrier is saying is that this is the deal, or I suppose we'll examine that in the textbook or in the book. But I'm looking forward to reading it. I think it should be interesting. And so if any of our listeners are interested in following, maybe if they get a gift card or something in their stocking from Santa.
Yeah, from Santa Claus.
They can buy Sense and Goodness Without God, A Defense of Metaphysical Naturalism by Richard Carrier. And then on the 7th, then we'll talk about that. So That's the God or Not book club, right? We're giving it a shot.
Terrific.
We'll see how that goes.
Of course, since this is the podcast, we're going to have some new episodes. Of course, every other week we have a new episode coming up. We're going to have some episodes that we're going to cover.
We're going to make more episodes. We got to keep doing this.
We're going to keep rolling down this. This train is going to keep rolling.
All right.
We're doing better than I expected. So, even though I have absolutely nothing to compare it to, I'm guessing is that I feel good about it. So we're going to go with it. But we're going to talk more about morality because that was obviously a big topic, and we covered a lot of ground. So we're going to hit morality again. We're going to talk about prejudice and racism. We have that on the docket as well. Scott is. We're going to have this kind of split episode.
It's kind of like a prisoner exchange.
It is prisoner exchange. Scott goes to church, and we're not going to tell you what that all implies. You're going to have to listen to the podcast in order to get all the details and the goodies about that. But Scott does walk into church, and he has successfully walked out. He wasn't struck down by the Old Testament God of wrath and anger and fury. And then I will be going and sitting in on a podcast here in the Columbus area. Since I'm from Columbus, Ohio, there's some podcasters in the Columbus area that talk specifically about LGBTQIA+ issues, and so I'll be sitting in on that. And so
right there in your wheelhouse, right here, right in the sweet spot for Jamie,
right in the sweet spot. So we will, no pun intended. So we will be talking about all kinds of things. We have some really interesting topics too coming up. I know some of you have been talking about wanting more of a bloodbath, some more blood. Listen, it's coming. Trust me, it is coming. We have some knockdown dragouts. So if you like that kind of thing,
right. Well, we got a couple more apologetics episodes coming up too. We're doing like fine tuning.
Yep.
And and then we'll see how that all kind of gels together and so forth.
And then we do have one final announcement before we get to our Christmas episode here, and that is Scott and I are planning to have a debate. We are going to duke it out in person now. in person, mind you, probably this coming fall. So the fall of 2020, Scott and I will be doing a debate, and so there'll be.
We're at the we have plans to make plans stage
right
now, I think.
We've picked a general time frame. So that's first step. So be listening for more details to come on the in-person bloodbath, the debate 2020, go heavy or don't come at all. So with that, let's talk about Christ Mass.
This is the main event.
All right, it's Christmas time.
Xmas.
Christmas time, Jamie.
Xmas.
Hey, don't you dare take the Christ out of Christmas.
Yeah, right.
So what we're going to do with our discussion today is, rather than having one big deep dive into something, we have a handful of smaller dives. We kind of figured it would be like a collection of wrapped gifts under the tree, or maybe yanking things out of your Christmas stocking and that kind of thing. So we have
MMA rounds. Is kind of how I was looking at it.
Oh, is that it?
That's right.
Okay,
That's
good.
Right.
All right, Saved by the Bell, huh?
Right, that's right.
Yes, and so we're going to have a handful of topics here, all Christmas and holiday related, and we're going to divide them into. We have 4 different categories here. First, we're going to talk about Christmas as a religious holiday. Clearly, there's a religious component to the holiday there.
Clearly.
We'll also talk about Christmas as a secular holiday, and then Christmas as a divider. Christmas as a tool that's used to separate people, and then Christmas as an includer. And we'll finish off with that one.
I love you, Scott. Did you see what I did there?
As demonstrated by Jamie.
That's right.
All right, yeah, that's going to hit the cutting room floor.
No,
but anyway,
it's
so
not.
then
It's awesome.
All right, so first we want to talk about Christmas as a religious holiday, obviously centered around the birth of Jesus, and I thought maybe first we could talk about, is this in fact Jesus' birthday? What do you think about that? I know you have
I got some.
You feel
thoughts.
like you got an open and shut case there. Let's see, what do you got?
Not really. Well, here's the thing: we've got no freaking idea. So.
All right.
Well,
there we go.
That's not quite that beautiful and closed ended. So we do have a couple of options that are kind of on the table. One of which was, and this is the one that is probably, or it seems to have the most support. There's some oral traditions, Jewish traditions, that basically state that if you're a prophet of God, that you would die on the day you were conceived. In terms
really?
of in terms of so like on your birthday of conception, you would die. So you wouldn't actually be conceived and then die. It's not like you live a day. You know what I'm saying? So there's this tradition that if you're a prophet of God, in the Jewish tradition, you die on the same day of the year that you were conceived, and so. Passover, obviously, Jesus died on Passover, March 25th ish, and then if you obviously fast forward 9 months, bada bing, bada boom, that would put December 25th as.
Well, I think you got that backwards there, though.
Bada bing, bada boom.
Bada boom. No, so no. If you said died on the day, so die on the day. Oh, I see what you're saying now. So that means Mary and the Holy Spirit were.
Yes. Don't add porno music here, okay?
That's in flagrante delicto, as it were, right?
Yeah. So that would, So December 25th, that's kind of was, and that's option number 1.
Okay.
As far as Jesus' birth. Option number 2 is we have no idea, really.
Okay.
So we have one major option that has any kind of any kind of ancient source to it, so to speak. But for Christians, pretty much throughout the ages, especially people who obviously don't realize that this is a tradition of the Jewish people, that a prophet dies on the day of their birth, or the same day of the year they're conceived. People don't know that, so they obviously just take Christmas as a day they remember, Jesus' birth and Emmanuel, Christ with us. That kind
well,
of
it's funny that you mention Christians throughout the ages. I'm gonna let a couple of Christians speak for me here, and it, to be honest with you, it doesn't really matter to me. First of all, it's if you look at the Jesus story, with the shepherds guiding their flock by night and all that fun stuff, it's darn cold in Israel right around now.
No, it's not really.
Yeah, the lows get down to 42 degrees on typically, right? So that's getting close. So it's not below freezing, but it's certainly cold out. But anyway.
Yeah, but you do realize
setting that aside.
No, we can't set that aside. Listen, I do realize the nativity scene as portrayed is not completely accurate. It's almost like you see a poster, like a movie poster, and they have like shots of like different scenes, like all in kind of one. The nativity scene is a bit like that. I mean, the wise men that came, there weren't 3 of them. We don't know how many there were, but they came several years after Jesus was born. So it's not like they were there. Jesus probably wasn't born in a stable. He was probably born in a cave below the living area of relatives, really. And as far as the idea of, there were animals there because that's where they would keep the animals at night. But as far as the temperature goes, this is perfect time in Israel for shepherds to be out and feeding their flock. It's just after rainy season. And so the ground is like perfect, like it's green all over the place. And so there's plenty. No, this is like legit, bro. I mean, I'm okay. Well,
tell you what, you camp out in your backyard when it's 42 degrees out.
No, what they would do is they would take the flock into a cave, and would. I mean, this is historical. They would build a fire at the opening that would both keep the flock in from wandering out and getting eaten by whatever, and it would keep other things from coming in to get them. So it's not like they were like out walking around with their sheep. They were probably in their caves trying to go to bed.
Sure. Okay. We'll go with that.
You don't sound convinced.
Okay. To be honest, I told you it doesn't really matter to me, but that seems like what you said seems reasonable to me.
Okay.
All right. And so,
wow, wait, take note. Okay.
Well, see, all you had to do was say something reasonable, and I would recognize that it was reasonable.
Yeah.
You see?
Whatever, you jerk.
So there's a cause and effect there going.
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
So anyway, I want to bring up some words from Reverend Increase Mather. He was with the Pilgrims. He was a Puritan minister in Boston in 1687, and he wrote, the early Christians who first observed the Nativity on December 25th did not do so thinking that Christ was born in that month, but because the heathen Saturnalia was at that time kept in Rome, and they were willing to have those pagan holidays metamorphosed into Christian ones. Those were his words.
Right.
That was not mine. And also, more recently, Baptist evangelist Charles Spurgeon, in his Christmas Eve sermon in 1871, he said, "We have no superstitious regard for times and seasons. Certainly we do not believe in the present ecclesiastical arrangement called Christmas. First, because we do not believe in the Mass at all, but abhor it, whether it be said or sung in Latin or in English. And secondly, because we find no scriptural warrant whatever for observing any day as the birthday of the Savior, and consequently its observance as a superstition, because not of divine authority." Now, Although what you just said about the Jews they're the Jewish tradition, that would seem to go against Charles Spurgeon, what he said.
Yeah, but he was quoting.
He was saying there's no,
he was quoting.
Right.
He was saying in the Bible, we have no reason to believe that Jesus was born on December 25th, and that's true.
Okay.
There's absolutely nothing biblical that says Jesus was born on December 25th. This is a Jewish tradition, so it's not like it's in the Bible. It's just a Jewish tradition. It's just one option.
Okay. All right.
But as far as the first quote goes, about Saturnalius, or Saturnalia. So this was for our listeners, this was a Roman celebration that happened between it started December 17th. That was the day.
Yeah, around the solstice.
December 17th, exactly. Then they extended it to include up until December the 23rd or 24th. So I suppose we could have taken over the pagan holiday, but if we would have, I'm assuming we would have taken it over on the 17th. Because that was the day it was celebrated.
Maybe.
Right. So, it just would make sense to me. For instance, Halloween happens October 31st.
Right.
If Christians were going to hijack that day, I'm assuming we'd hijack that day and not several days after Halloween.
Possibly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, birth, right? So this virgin birth, right? So
virgin birth.
What's your take on the virgin birth?
Yes.
You are pro virgin birth?
Yeah. Listen, here's the thing. If the first verse in the Bible is true, then all other verses are at least reasonable. Like I said, if the first verse in the Bible's true.
Okay.
So I believe the Bible's true. I believe in miracles. I believe that miracles can happen, and that would be a miracle. So if God can create everything from nothing, then he can impregnate a woman with divinity.
Well, let me ask you this, and I'm sure you have your locked and loaded with your response here, so I'll lob you this one here. So what do you say to the people who suggest that there was a translation error and that it should have just been a maiden and not a virgin? The word that was used in the Bible could also just mean maiden and doesn't necessarily mean
right. But when you look at
a virgin.
Yeah, but when you look at tradition or when you look at the words in context, when you see that word maiden, that implies virgin. So I know that was how so? Because in that language, especially particularly in the Greek, okay, that word for maiden also means young child.
Right.
So there's
a variety of things that it could mean, right? Virgin being one of them.
But again, in context, though, they're pretty certain that it isn't a translation error. That
right.
That's what is
the context that tells you that?
Regardless, what's that? Well, we'd have to go.
What is that
Look
context?
it up. We'd have to look up in the Greek and go through some hermeneutics. I'm not prepared to do that right now.
Okay.
But I'm just saying that they're pretty certain that they've gotten that right. But regardless, whether or not it was a virgin birth, I don't think it makes a difference to me.
Okay.
It doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
No, it makes sense to me from a theological standpoint. So that's another reason why I wouldn't. I have no reason to question the interpretation there.
So do you think that, because we both know that there was lots of other virgin birth stories from around that time and from before then, and they would have been familiar with. And so
there weren't. There weren't.
Yeah, there were. And so and you know that there were. And so what I'm saying though is that it was a time of fantastic stories.
Okay.
And
so what's your point with that though?
My point was I was going along with the point that you said.
Okay.
You said it doesn't matter to me whether, it wouldn't matter if it turned out not to be the case. And I'm saying, but we would still expect to see stories like that.
Okay.
one more thing about the virgin birth. So was that supposed to be like a sexual thing? What was the Holy Spirit? Was it like a illicit meeting in the evening or what? What happened there?
There's nothing sexual about it.
What was
whatsoever?
What was Jesus's DNA like?
Well, Jesus had only the mother's DNA.
So he was a clone of the mother?
Well, I mean, he had whatever attributes that God decided to give him. So he didn't have a human father, as we would say.
Okay.
So
well, what about the possibility that maybe he did?
He did what? Have a human father?
Yeah.
Well,
I think that if young engaged woman, maybe because back then, if you were not pure when you got married, they would stone you, right? Or punish you of some sort. So she'd be motivated to lie if she had an affair or something, or was maybe raped.
Well,
she would be very motivated to say something. Don't you think?
They didn't stone women for being raped. Okay, there's numerous verses in the Bible that
but she would certainly be seen as less valuable as a...
That's true, but I would say that one of the things that attests to the virgin birth was Joseph's going along with the whole gig. Because if you read the text, you know that he was planning on getting rid of her.
Right.
Because obviously I would too. Like, okay, he didn't believe her either.
Right.
But then he had an encounter with an angel that said, hey, take Mary. What is happening here is divine. She wasn't with anybody else. And so I think that...
so don't you think his reaction would give a sign that kind of thing happened? If that's what came to his... If Mary said, oh, by the way, I'm with child, and his first thought is, how am I going to get out of this? Then obviously obviously that was a common enough thing that he thought of it.
Well, I mean, where else you can have there's only one option. Up until that point, there's one option on how you have babies.
Right.
So if she was pregnant, then it was easy for him to assume, okay, this is what went down.
Right.
And so, yes, that makes perfect sense. But what also makes perfect sense is that his mind was changed. He stayed with her when he was planning on, it says in the Bible, he's planning on getting away from her secretly, in terms of he was going to quietly kind of divorce her so as to not publicly humiliate her. And so he wasn't looking to get her stoned or anything like that. He was just looking to get out of it. And then his mind was changed. And obviously then we see the rest is history, I guess.
All right.
Maybe.
Okay. That's
virgin birth.
25 minutes on the first part. Okay. All right. So we've talked about whether or not Jesus was actually born on this day. We've talked about the virgin birth. So you mentioned earlier that there was some possibly some pagan origins there. So, I mean, we know that at least many of our modern Christmas traditions don't stem from the Bible. Right.
Correct.
And so what do you think? And so you mentioned Saturnalia before. There was like a time of feasting and of gift exchange. And we have some of the pagan things like decorating trees and like Yule log and mistletoe and stuff like that. And so what's your take on that whole big thing? What's the deal there?
Well, I don't think that Christmas was or we hijacked a pagan holiday, but to me, it really doesn't matter much. In terms of, what we're trying to celebrate or what we're trying to commemorate. So, well, I mean, since at least the, I don't know, 3rd or 4th century, they've been celebrating it as the birth of Christ. And so I'm fine with that. It doesn't bother me if it does show up that, hey, we hijacked December 25th so that the pagans could, we could give them a little taste of their own medicine. And we didn't want our offspring celebrating their pagan, whatever, something or other. It doesn't bother me. I don't really. I'm not moved by exactly what date Jesus was born. That's just the day that we choose to celebrate. I think that's okay.
Okay, so that let me throw this in. Speaking on behalf of another Christian, as I am wont to do. So this is from Pope Gregory, and this was in a letter that he wrote to religious leaders in Britain in 606 A.D. And it says, the temples of the idols among the people should on no account be destroyed. The idols themselves are to be destroyed, but the temples themselves are to be aspersed with holy water, altars set up in them, and relics deposited there. And here's the key part here. For if these temples are well built, they must be purified from the worship of demons and dedicated to the service of the true God. In this way, we hope that the people, seeing that their temples are not destroyed, may abandon their error, and flocking more readily to their accustomed resorts, may come to know and adore the true God. And so what he's saying there is that if we put God into their churches, then it'll be easier for them to swallow, right? It'll be an easier pill for them to take. And so you were just saying that it's the date, the reason that we ended up on that date doesn't really matter that much to you. And I can kind of see what you're saying. For you, it's more about not about the day, but it's about just celebrating the event.
Yeah.
And it's okay if it's not on the day. So what do you think about the idea of early Christians kind of appropriating other holidays? Do you think that's relevant at all here, or do you think that's just
was he
kind of a side issue?
December? Was he referring to December 25th? Or was he just referring to?
This was just referring to
general,
just a policy in general, just an approach in general.
So it wasn't necessarily for Christmas, but it was. Well, I mean, would in that kind of culture, that kind of thing happened? I mean, would we do that now? No, we'd get sued. Obviously the church doesn't have that kind of pull anymore. And we can't do that kind of thing.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that there, if we look at Jerusalem nowadays, I mean, it's, in the last, decades, if not centuries, it's kind of been, there's been battle back and forth, is this, this temple should be a temple, should be a Muslim temple, or this temple should be a Christian temple. And, there's kind of like, there's that area.
There's been more fighting. There's been more fighting over land than there have been like temples. I mean, it's been fairly peaceful for, as far as that goes, for a while. I mean, you see Christians, Jews, and Muslims. That's the holy center of all three major, monotheistic religions. And coming from somebody who's been there, it's amazingly peaceful in terms of what we're talking about here, as far as okay, that's the Temple Mount. That belongs to Christians.
Right.
Like, no, Muslims have had that now for decades, and it's probably going to stay that way for a while. There isn't as much of that fighting as there is fighting over land.
Right.
So you're right. Like this man's line.
Yeah, in the news today, that's kind of, that's kind of the thing. But I'm talking about over the centuries, with the Crusades and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there was definitely battles over that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, there were. I mean, that's just history. I mean, I don't necessarily condone Christians doing things unchristlike. But then again, we have to take things in the culture in which they were done in.
Right.
So,
okay. Well, that's fine. That's fine. Before we get off the pagan issue, I just wanted to bounce something. And again, I'm not presenting this as like, haha, kind of a thing, but I just want to hear your thoughts on, I'm sure you've heard this before. I'll be surprised if you haven't heard this before, but this is from Jeremiah in Jeremiah 10. And it says, "Hear the word which the Lord speaks to you, O house of Israel. Thus says the Lord, do not learn the way of the Gentiles. Do not be dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the Gentiles are dismayed at them. For the customs of the peoples are futile. For one cuts a tree from the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen, with the axe. They decorate it with silver and gold. They fasten it with nails and hammers so that it will not topple. They are upright like a palm tree, and they cannot speak. They must be carried because they cannot go by themselves. Do not be afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, nor can they do any good. So basically what they're saying, I mean, it sounds an awful lot like a Christmas tree they're describing there. So what is your take on that? I mean, to me, it sounds like it's a condemnation of this pagan ritual of bringing in a Christmas tree.
Yeah, I mean, it may have been. I mean, those are, when you look at what was going on during that time, what God was trying to do, or what God did, is there was obviously his people, the nation of Israel, the nation by which he was going to then come into humanity and present himself as one of them, as a Jew, right, into humanity. And so there's the whole Old Testament is this this history of God kind of protecting, trying to protect his people. And part of what was going on was that in Israel, or a Jewish person would intermarry with a Gentile or someone non-Jewish, and then begin bringing in their customs and begin and then be deconverted and end up celebrating
okay, so they're saying
idols and things like that. So
pagan creep they're talking about, right?
What's pagan creep?
Creep is like if something is hanging around you a lot and it kind of creeps up on you and it kind of seeps into you. And,
I've never heard that before.
Really?
It's called creep? Yeah, I swear. Like it's creeping in on you?
Yeah, like pagan creep would be like, if you hang around pagans, you'll eventually turn into one kind of a thing.
Yeah, it was kind of like his, the idea there is that when they would adopt, or when they would intermarry and things like that with the Gentiles, they would adopt a lot of what the Gentiles were doing and then end up serving other gods.
So do you think that this is false gods? Do you think that this is so keeping that in mind, if that's what that part was about, do you think that so now we have Christmas trees in our houses. Right. We take them in, we put gold and silver on them. We tack them down so they don't fall over because they're not alive anymore, right? They're not living trees. And so, at least, I haven't investigated this deeply, so maybe I'm reading this verse wrong, but it sure seems like we've adopted this pagan tradition. Do you think it's that they're trying to do the flip on that? Do you think they're trying to do a Christian creep on that, or? Obviously, there's not a lot of pagans around nowadays, or at least not around here.
Right.
But I don't know.
No, I don't. I mean, it might at first reference seem to be a Christmas tree. So.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I was just curious of what your thought of it, and if you don't really have any thoughts on it, then that's okay.
Well, a lot of times, what the Gentiles did was they would make these things an idol. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like they just bring these things in and set them up and, hey, look how beautiful this tree is. We're gonna bring it in and we're gonna use it for this celebration or whatever. They would bring things like that in and they would make them gods. They would worship them. And so I think that's probably what it was talking about. But even if it wasn't, when you look into the New Testament and you look at probably in Ephesians or Galatians, the Apostle Paul talks about different traditions that certain feast days are for some. Some keep certain days holy, others.
And he said, he said the Christmas trees are okay. We're going with the Christmas trees. Well, thumbs up on the trees.
And he gave the thumb
Screw
up.
Jeremiah. He didn't know what he was talking about. That was yesterday's policy. We've had a change in government here, right? This new covenant.
That's right. It's a new policy, baby.
Right. Okay. Right. This policy change comes right from the top.
Right from the top.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So the last little bit of this whole thing then is Santa Claus. Santa Claus. Okay, so how does Santa Claus fit into the Christian concept of Christmas?
Yeah, so Saint Nicholas, he was born like in the late 200s AD, I think, and so he was this saint that allegedly, and I say allegedly, we do have some sources. I just don't know how early they are, that he would give gifts and things like that. But we do know that obviously that St. Nicholas was a real person. He attended the Council of Nicaea. As a matter of fact, this is kind of cool.
Did he show up in his red suit and his big black boots not on the reindeer and all that stuff? And
he did bring his boxing gloves, because I'll tell you this, you'll get a kick out of this. So one of the main reasons why they had a council, this particular council, Council of Nicaea, is because there was a heresy going on. Basically, they lowered Jesus. One guy, Arian, he lowered Jesus down to something less than God.
Okay.
And so they're like, "Oh, we can't have this." So they brought in this council, and they talked about all kinds of things. This was one of them. Well, now this is from what I understand, this is straight up legit. I don't know if he punched him or slapped him, but Saint Nicholas either punched or slapped Arian for this heresy, and that's like straight up legit. So we do know that Saint Nick was he was a bishop. And that he used to give gifts, that he was very giving. So
maybe the rosy cheeks was from his bloody nose.
From the slap. No, so as far as where does Santa come into play, other than this Saint Nick kind of thing. So Santa Claus is kind of a mixture of like the idea of Kris Kringle and this Saint Nicholas. That kind of has morphed or changed. And I mean, listen, Santa's changed a bunch. Think about when you and I were kids. Santa used to go down the physically, my man would squeeze down the chimney somehow. But then now you watch these movies and Santa like somehow magically, like it's almost like Star Trek. He just kind of appears in the living room, drops the gifts off, boom, he's back up in the sleigh.
He's got the latest technology, and he's
right.
Santa's got to keep up with the times. But I know that Nicholas used to be like this little elf. I mean, that's what, like in the night before Christmas story, right? He's an elf. He's a little guy.
Yeah, he is an elf. Elf. Yeah. So the idea of Santa Claus is kind of like morphed over time.
So what do you do with Santa Claus in your family?
In our house,
what's your
Camden and Abby right now? Camden is 9 and Abby's 7.
Okay.
So our thing is this: we talk, we let them believe in Santa. My son has been asking a lot of questions this year. I'm assuming this will be the last year that he'll believe in Santa. But we don't have a problem with our kids with Santa Claus. Now, we don't make it a big thing like Santa brings them one gift and all the rest of the gifts are from us. Okay. So we're not going to give Santa all that credit for all the hard work.
Okay.
But hold on a second. They're asleep, babe. We're good. I promise I didn't.
Oh, she thought you might have. Oh, you ruined it.
Yeah,
Way to go.
She came in here in a panic. No, I tucked them both in. Let's keep this in. So we don't mind celebrating it, but obviously that's not our focal point. So they know that it's a gig, and he comes. We'll leave cookies out. Daddy will eat them.
So
they don't know that.
Do you kind of spin Santa as something related? Not like familially related, but like is it like
straight up commercial, baby?
It just happens at the same time, or?
Yep, straight up commercial, baby. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah. We don't try to spin them anyway. Just this is just happenstance. These two things kind of fall at the same time, and this is one of the ways we celebrate Jesus' birth. That's that's how it is. So, but we try to keep the primary focus on the fact that this is the time that at least that we celebrate that Jesus came. Yep.
All right. Well,
funny. How about you?
How about me?
What do you do with all this quote religion and for a family that isn't as religious? What do you do?
Well, I mean, we still get a little bit of religion. Obviously, we live in the United States, and so there's going to be some of that floating around. And like, so we've talked about how my family is religious mostly, and so like for example, it's kind of a joke in our family now. But when I was growing up in my at my grandparents' house, we would always have this program. We called it the program. Every Christmas we'd have a program. And sometimes it would be, my grandma would like pass out these scripts and we would act out the Bible story. And sometimes it would be like, my dad would have this article clipping from a newspaper or something that he would read and talk about, something that was meaningful to him. And so we had a variety of traditions but as far as our family now, Lori and I decided early on that we were going to be straight with the kids the whole time. We weren't going to
humbug, man.
No, we did one better though. You say bah humbug, but you've not experienced Christmas in the Dickey household before. And okay. so the kids never lost anything. And so what we did was we would talk about how Santa was more of an anthropomorphization.
That's pretty good, dude, because that's a hard word.
Anthropomorphization of this Christmas spirit, right? And so they obviously were familiar with things like Aesop's fables and stuff, where they have the different animals represent and the tortoise and the hare and all that stuff. And so they're familiar with the idea of concepts and ideas and ideals being represented by these various things. And so that wasn't a big, a big deal for them. But early on, and this is something that we also decided specifically to do with our kids, is we wanted to, especially during this time of year, during the holiday season, the idea of helping people that are less fortunate than we are. And so
that's terrific.
One thing that my kids did, my son started doing this, and then my daughter joined in when she got old enough, is they would raise, like Adler would make a lemonade stand in the, during July and stuff like that. And he would save the money, and then we would use it. And like one year we would buy art supplies for the children's hospital, or we'd go out and buy books. And so we would do that during the Christmas season. We'd actually bring the stuff to the children's hospital. And so we specifically would have the kids wear Santa hats. And so we would say, "You're Santa. You get to be Santa now." And so they were embodying.
Oh, that's cool.
They were embodying the idea. So we kind of build Santa not as like a ho ho ho, and you go sit on the Santa's lap at the mall and stuff like that.
Right.
We kind of spun Santa as like this, the Christmas spirit kind of thing. And so it's something that you can get involved in, and you can do something, and you can actually be the Santa Claus to someone else.
That's so crazy that you mentioned that. First of all, I think that's very cool that you guys do that. Very commendable. But it's crazy that you mentioned, because my wife just mentioned that tonight, that maybe next year both of the kids will kind of be out of this Santa business, and that we could encourage them to somehow be more involved in being Santa for someone else.
Right.
I mean, almost the exact words you use. That's terrific.
Yeah.
I think that's a terrific idea.
Right.
And especially if, like, obviously we live in America, and so Christmas is a thing. And so, I suppose if it's going to be altered in a way, man, that's a terrific way to do it.
Yeah,
and that is something I could definitely get behind. That is,
another thing.
Out of curiosity, what did they do this year with regards to giving? Did you guys end up deciding?
To be honest, I don't know if we haven't done anything yet this year.
You pagan.
But other things we've done in the past though is like, I don't know if I'm sure they have this kind of thing there, but it's like, there'll be like a Christmas tree, and like, my wife would get these but
right.
like in the Skyways, they'd have like a big Christmas tree there, and then like there'd be names that you could pluck off of it, like families that needed things,
right.
And they'd say, family, there's a mother and 2 boys and a girl or something like that, and so we would do that once in a while too. and the kids really got into it. They be like, yeah, can we find a family that has a boy about my age and has a girl about my age, and then they would think about, what would I want? What kind of thing would I want? And then the kids got to go shopping. So but we haven't done anything yet this year, so maybe it's not. We're a little bit behind the schedule here for this year.
Yeah, don't let Lori hear, but I hear you're behind in shopping for her as well.
Oh, she knows. She knows that. There's no hiding there. She knows very well that.
You're behind the 8 ball as well.
I am, and that's not unusual for me. I do have a tendency to procrastinate, but also I have a legitimate, reason to, and that is
right. You have a bit of an excuse,
right? Our semester ends right around this time, and so
I'll give you a pass.
The end of the semester, and then I got finals week, and then I got grading, and so. But yeah, you're and I just let me put to you this way: I spend a lot of money on overnight shipping.
That's right.
So
my wife would kill me if I spent money on.
I'm contributing to the economy in that way. I'm contributing to the economy. So that's our deal, and so that's a good way that we can transition now into Christmas as a secular holiday.
Yeah,
and one thing that I've seen on like atheist podcasts and atheist books and stuff is some atheists. They're very much against the idea of celebrating Christmas. Obviously, the name right there. It's there's a tie into Christianity there, and so they'll have like solstice parties or Kwanzaa
right.
or not Kwanzaa, but what was the one on Seinfeld? The do you know what I'm talking about?
Festivus. For the rest of us.
Yes, that was it. The Festivus.
That's right.
So I've seen that kind of thing before, and to me, there's two Christmases really. There's the the religious Christmas, but then there's also the secular Christmas, and we just choose to celebrate the secular Christmas. Right. We choose the Santa Claus, the snowman, the gingerbread, all that fun, the Christmas tree, the tinsel.
Yeah.
We just don't go to church. We don't go into and here's something that we've done too, and you might want to consider instituting this in the Goodlet family too. Is so when we talk about Christmas, when we talk about Santa Claus, because like I said, we told them right away that there wasn't a real person named Santa Claus, and they were fine. It didn't spoil anything for them. But we told them that other kids believe this,
right? And
it's made a great transition into some people believe in this God thing. Okay. And so we got and so it's kind of an analogy there, right? There's this thing, a bunch of people believe in it. They kind of get mad if you don't talk about it the right way, and this, that, and the other thing, and then there's this other thing now. We have these grown-ups that believe this thing, and so we're
not quite the same.
We can coexist. We can that was my point, though, is that we can get along with the Santa believers. We can get along with the God believers too.
You know what I was thinking too when you were talking about how there are some atheists who just despise, loathe the idea of this Christian holiday. Those aren't atheists. They're anti-theists. I mean, there's to me anyhow, there's a huge distinction between someone who doesn't believe in God, someone like you, who's willing to dialogue, who's willing to have a discussion, who's more open-minded. There's a big difference between someone like you and an anti-theist. The anti-theists are the ones where they wear the emotions on their sleeve. They may have had a bad experience, maybe they haven't, but they despise our God for whatever reason they have. So there's this huge distinction.
Well, I wouldn't say they despise your God. I would say that they despise the belief in the God. And
regardless,
the effects.
However you want to say it, they're the ones. The anti-theists are the ones that they wear their emotions. Anything like this brings up hostility.
I've seen that. You can be an anti-theist and not be an angry anti-theist. Anti-theist basically just means not only do you not believe, but you're against religion. And I think there's some legitimate reasons, but maybe we can take this up at a different episode. The concept,
we're gonna have
the concept of an
already
anti-theist.
Like 2 hours long.
Right. Yeah. Right. Clearly we're going to be doing some heavy editing here. But yeah, I totally see where you're coming from. I've definitely heard from atheists that are angry, and that for them it's a matter of principle to not talk about Christmas. For me, it's just
right.
If Christians can borrow the word Easter for their big holiday, we can borrow the word Christmas for our holiday. And so it's not so much. Yeah, the word Christmas has a Christian origin, but to me, it doesn't tie in any particular meaning or anything like that. And so right. For me, yeah, I'm happy to celebrate Christmas, because to me, it doesn't have to be a religious holiday. There is this wholly secular aspect to this holiday, and that's what I enjoy: the getting together with family, having fun with friends, and having some time off from work, getting a chance to splurge on the kids and to but also to instill some thoughtfulness and concern for our fellow human beings and so on. And so so there's plenty there, without having to dip into the Jesus pot. Although we got plenty of that when we were kids, and
right. You got your life full,
but
those few
right,
years.
right. But speaking of my family traditions, I did want to take a second to, and this is something that's happened in recent years that kind of caught me off guard, and that is when I've known for a long time that I didn't believe in God, but there was a period of time when I was younger, maybe in my 20s and early 30s, where I was kind of like, well, could God be like Spinoza's God, like Einstein's God, right? The God of nature and the awesomeness of the natural world. And I went through kind of the different phases of trying to reconcile myself with, what I was raised, the environment which I was raised. But there was a point in time where I decided, well, no, I don't believe in a God, and I'm an atheist. And then there was also another point in time where I should make it clear to my family. I didn't want there to be any.
You didn't come out during Christmas time, did you?
No, I didn't.
Oh, good. Okay.
Well, I don't know.
I don't know why that sounded like horrific to me. Like, no, don't do it, Scott. Don't do it.
No, it wasn't. Well, I don't think it was. I don't remember. And so at first, my parents, they're not really, we don't agree on everything, but we do agree that, a family's a priority, and that we care about each other, and that we don't want to let things get in the way. And I was expecting, and at first there was kind of like a pushback. For example, there was one, and I'm not saying this because I think my family was trying to be overbearing or were trying to push me in any particular direction. I think that they were just, they weren't sure what to do. And so they were doing what they thought was best. And at least that's my impression of it. Maybe they were being jerks about it. I don't know, but
they kicked you out of their basement, right?
It didn't seem like it at the time. But, for example, one Christmas I got a gift from them. It was a $100 bill. But then they also gave me a $10 bill, and they said, you can have the $100 bill when you give the $10 bill to your church.
Oh,
and my first thought was, that's kind of a dick move. but then when I thought about it, I thought, well, I don't think it is. I think that they want to still instill. I mean, they're still my parents, right? And they still they still feel a responsibility to share what they think is right and good. And so, I was angry at it for a moment, but then I quickly got over it when I realized that, that wasn't it. But so really, I didn't spend the $100. I kept it in my dresser drawer with that $10 bill, and it was just going to stay there. And
really? So you were like, that was a hill you were going to die on at that point.
Well, maybe it was. I didn't feel like it was me being, screw you, I'm not going to fall for your trap kind of thing. It was more like, to me at least, it felt like it was, well, this is this is what they gave me. And so, that's their wishes. And so that's fine. I'll go along with that. I just let it sit there. I didn't complain about it or didn't begrudge, that my brother and my sister just went out and spent it or whatever. I don't know what they did with theirs, but, and I just let it sit there. And then, months later, like, my mom is in the choir and she does these performances and stuff. She had a performance at a church. So I went and I brought the $10 and I dropped it in the plate. And so I was like, there, I've satisfied my requirement.
Obligation.
Yeah.
That's
and
right.
so,
Good.
But since then,
I don't know why I was rooting for you just now. I'm like, come on, baby, get that $100.
Baby steps.
You can do it, Scott. You can do it.
I can see the cracks forming, Jamie. I can see the cracks forming. But since then, and there's been some heated moments and some less heated moments, since then. But in recent years, and I really got to hand this to my family because clearly they decided at one point that we want to include Scott's family in our family thing. And so, and I really do appreciate this. And that is they've really laid off, like, for example, if they'll have us over on Christmas or something, we don't do the program anymore.
Right.
And we don't, and there'll be a prayer, but it won't be in your face kind of thing. And they don't make that big of a deal about it. In fact, I mean, they would do something like, so how do you feel about us having a prayer or something like that? Or, it's kind of it's a thoughtfulness. And so, so I really do appreciate that my family has done it, even though they believe and yeah, I'm fine with them praying as long as they don't expect me to participate. And I've never told my kids that they couldn't, but they can choose to do whatever they want in that respect. But, it just goes to show you that it doesn't have to be butting heads, and so, there was maybe a couple of years where we were uncomfortable going over for religious holidays, but it's definitely, I don't know. I've never really talked about it to them. I guess I am now, kind of in a way, but, I don't know if they sat down and said, you know what, let's, we can, worship our God at the same time, not throwing it in anybody's face. And so it's been really awesome. And I know that there's, and I say that from, I feel like a privileged position here, because I know there's many atheists out there whose families, it's not quite so smooth. So anyway, I just wanted to share that it is possible for an atheist to celebrate Christmas with a religious family and have there be harmony and so forth.
Right.
And so, but that's the idea of so we have the religious holiday and we have the secular holiday. So speaking of secular holiday, we live in a government, in a nation where we have freedom of religion. And part of that is the separation of church and state. And so the government itself shouldn't be representing a particular religion. What are your thoughts on the idea of like a nativity scene on the state capitol or something like that? Right. What do you what is your personal thoughts? And then what do you think as far as being a citizen of the United States?
All right. Well, personally, I think neutrality is a myth. Okay. So I think that everyone holds to some kind of religion. You may not call it that, and you may not worship the same way I do, but everybody has a worldview, a way of looking at things. So I don't think that there's any kind of neutral ground. That's like with when laws are being passed, people are like, don't throw you can't legislate morality. Well, wait a minute. All laws legislate morality. The question is, whose morality is it going to legislate? Now, we might disagree with you. You might disagree with me on those things. Obviously, that might be for another time. So I think neutrality is a myth in terms of that. So I don't know that there is a neutral thing.
For an individual, right? You're saying neutrality is a myth. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that, but you're talking about from the people's perspective, an individual person.
Right. Yes. Yes. Now,
but what about the government?
Right. So as the government, I mean, to me, it doesn't bother me at all that the manger scene isn't on the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't bother me at all. I know that bothers some Christians, but I try to be consistent, right? I don't know that I would want, something else up there. So, okay, let's try to have it as neutral as possible. The thing I think where it bothers me is when they're trying to like erase or change history in the name of inclusion or political correctness.
Like, what do you mean?
So, like, and this doesn't necessarily have to do much with Christmas, but like taking down the Confederate stuff down south, like, is like that's a part of our history. Or
that's a different
Columbus
story.
Day, renaming Columbus Day to National Indigenous Peoples Day. I mean, to me, at that point, that's not neutral. That those are worldview issues. So
right, but with
again, this might be a whole different podcast.
Those are those are worldviews that include things like slavery and so forth.
You asked me my opinion, right? You asked me my opinion. So those are totally separate. Well, listen, humanists also champion Margaret Sanger, who was a horrific woman. Her beliefs were horrific. So, like, my point is that I think it's tough for anybody or anything to be completely neutral. But it doesn't bother me for our government, state, local, federal, to try and be neutral. What bothers me is when they go out of their way to be anti-theist. Like when they go out of their way to change things.
What do you mean?
For instance, well, if they wanted to sing a Christmas carol on the steps or something, and it happens to say the name of Jesus in it, or so, we can't have that. Well, wait a minute. This is Christmas. This is a holiday in America that we're celebrating. Like, I'm not saying that we should go all Christian out on you. I'm not going to bang you over the head with the Bible, but like, really? We're not going to sing a carol because it's got the name Jesus in it, or because it says Merry Christmas? Like, to me, that's bothersome.
Well, I don't think there's a problem with Merry Christmas. I think,
yeah. What do you mean? There's not a problem with Merry Christmas? You got every Tom, Dick, and Harry, at least store. Now I know we're talking private business, but you got every Tom, Dick, and Harry store.
That's a separate thing.
Well, listen, I guarantee you, if you had somebody who made a fuss and ran down to the what is that called? Freedom from Religion Foundation. They would run down there and say, oh, so-and-so is like the security guard in there keeps telling people Merry Christmas. I guarantee you he would be asked to change to something neutral. Like, or idea of neutrality, like Happy Holidays or something like, which isn't neutral at all, but still, nonetheless, he would be asked to change that. I guarantee you that would happen.
I think if it was like a government employee, then that would.
Right, but you said it wasn't happening, and I'm saying that stuff like that does happen all the time. It's like
if somebody, if person says Merry Christmas, that's not. I mean, have you seen lawsuits against government employees for saying Merry Christmas?
I've seen Freedom from Religion Foundation, going after all kinds of public employees for doing things like that, for being involved. You can't say stuff like that.
I think you might be a little off on that. I mean, I know that they filed lawsuits against like having a government building that has like a nativity scene or something. I'm not talking about that
because I'm against that as well. Like, I get it. Like if the local government doesn't want the manger scene up there, boy, man, I get that. I'm totally in favor of taking that down.
I think you're. Well,
okay.
Yeah, well, maybe
some of these things up. It drives me
like
crazy.
A security guard saying Merry Christmas is going to cause a lawsuit. Really? Seriously? You've seen that?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
yes. It's one of those. That's what bugs me. It's like, wait a second. For the vast majority of, I would say, Americans, at least, or probably the world, Christmas or Christmas time is celebration of Christ's birthday.
Well, that's not justification for why that should be allowed.
Right. However, what bothers me is when people go out of their way over things like that. I'm not talking about the manger or things like that. I'm talking about these other things. Like they're like I don't believe you can be neutral. Like, I think it's very difficult for anything to be completely neutral. And so what I'm saying is this swing from a Christian, more of a Christianese kind of government or whatever, to a secularism, but not like this indifference to, but a complete rejection and exclusion of. But
that's not what's happening. First of all, we're not transitioning from a Christianese government to a secular government. We were a secular government from day one. Okay.
But do you understood what I was trying to say?
Right.
Though, right.
I get what you're saying.
But that wasn't what I was saying. I wasn't saying that the government was somehow Christian. I'm saying that we are seeing, and I understand why we're seeing some of this stuff. I get it, and I'm not against most of it. Mm-hmm. The idea of kind of the Christianizing being taken out of all of these various components of public and private life here in the U.S. So it's going from at least the appearance of more Christian or religious to secular.
I would say the population is changing.
Regardless,
the demographics of the population is changing, but the government is not changing. The government's changing in the other direction, right? But again, that's a whole other issue for another episode.
I'm just saying it's not going from like Merry Christmas to now being kind of indifferent. I'm seeing more of an exclusion. It's not just a freedom. It's instead of yes, you could be religious. It's now like, no, you can't in certain aspects. I know that's probably a totally different podcast.
I don't. Well, right? Actually, that's
separation of church and state.
That's kind of our next step here. Is we talked about Christmas as a religious holiday. We talked about as a secular holiday. Now we're looking at Christmas as a divider. I
hate you, Scott.
That's okay. In the fourth part, we'll come back together, and everybody will be happy again.
Yes, we will.
Okay,
we always come back together.
So you're seeing, I just don't see it. I don't see people saying that you can't say Merry. I've never heard anybody say that you can't say Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Well,
who told you that?
It happens. Well, I mean, I'd have to go dig up my sources. I mean, but
I can understand. I've heard things like saying that the government sponsored events should be more inclusive. And but that's different than saying like you, Jamie Goodlett, can't say Merry Christmas.
Yes, as a government employee, as part of making this government event more inclusive, you cannot do X, Y, and Z.
As a representative of the government. Right.
Well, if I'm a security guard and I'm working at the postal service, for Christmas time packages in and out, there are issues there where we're going what I'm trying to say is we're going from this place of where some of these things were acceptable in the past. Now have they not only become neutral, like, well, we don't care. Now you can't do that.
Right. But I think you're forgetting your favorite word here.
What's that?
What's your favorite word?
I don't know. What is my favorite?
Context,
okay,
right?
So
that's your favorite word. So you're forgetting the context here. Yeah. We can't, we don't want to have postal employees excluding people from the community. Okay, if somebody comes up and they have, clearly a Muslim outfit on with the hijab and so forth, and they say Merry Christmas to them, then that's a dividing, that's right. A dividing word there.
You don't see that
that's an exclusion.
You don't see that as a little extreme.
Yeah, I do see it as a little extreme, but I don't see it as a lot extreme.
Okay. Like I don't either. It's just a cumulative effect.
But still, it's still all part of that context, and the context is a context of separation, a context of us versus them, and it's not just the non-religious or the other religious picking on the Christians. There's it takes two to tango, right? And so not everybody is like this, but there are people that will say Merry Christmas or they say God bless you as almost like they're spitting it at you. It's like, screw you, I'm saying this to your face. What are you going to do about it? Right? Not everybody's like that. In fact, probably not most people are like that, but there are people like that. Okay. And so there's a context of, especially nowadays, of division, of people that are different. And that's one way to, a grain of sand is not going to hurt you very much. But if it's in your shoe all day, it's going to wear away. And by the end of the day, it's going to hurt like heck. Right. And so that's kind of the same thing. You say you're getting upset about a grain of sand. Well, it's not just the grain of sand. It's the fact that it was stuck in my shoe all day and I couldn't, I had these dress shoes on, so they're already kind of uncomfortable and, blah, 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 and this, that, and the other thing. And so it's more than just somebody saying Merry Christmas to you. It's that whole environment of rubbing salt in the wounds and of people who want to say things like, well, America's a Christian nation, and we around here, we say Merry Christmas or fuck you, that kind of thing. And so is that maybe that should be the motto of our Christmas episode here.
Yeah.
But do you know what I'm talking? Do you at least understand what I'm talking about there?
I can completely understand what you're talking about there. I think that part of my thing is, as a Christian, what I'm saying is we want to be inclusive of everyone except you. At least that's what I'm saying from a Christian perspective. We want to include everyone but the Christian. Forget you. Right? So
why do you feel that suggesting that government employees say Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas, why do you feel like that excludes you?
It's not just that. It's everything else. It seems to be that you're not seeing the government going after Islamic bakeries for not baking cakes for homosexuals. You're not seeing that.
Well, I've never heard of an Islamic bakery, but if there was one and they refused service, then I would be totally on the side.
You're consistent. It just seems as if you're seeing more and more of this, and maybe because that's what's hitting my news feed. I try to be as broad brushed as I can because I want to know at least what does somebody say. I read the Bible every day and the Washington Post so I can know what the enemy's plans are, or something like that. It's supposed to be a joke. Just so that you could, I try to be as broad brushed as I can. I try to have atheists as my friends on Facebook. You know what I'm saying? Just so I could at least try to understand their perspective better. If anything, it's going to allow me to just sharpen my sword, so to speak.
Well,
okay. Geez, that made me sound super jihadish there. Okay, can I walk that back?
Yeah.
Well, there's a verse in the Bible, iron
shield with a big cross on it, and
No, there's a verse in the Bible, iron sharpens iron, and just this idea of Christians challenging each other and on certain things to make each other better. That
okay.
Kind of that's where that was coming from. So don't read into that.
Right. Well, at least you recognize the possibility that maybe you have a biased viewpoint. Okay. Consider the possibility that somebody saying Happy Holidays, if they were trying to exclude you, they wouldn't say that. They'd say Happy Festivus or whatever. I mean, they would say, Happy Hanukkah or, Blessed Ramadan, or Ramadan, of course, comes at different times of the year, but you know what I mean? I mean, it's saying something like Happy Holidays is not exclusionary. But it can, well, I guess there's a caveat there. It can be. Just like God bless you can be spat at you like a curse, so can screw you, I'm saying happy holidays. And so, yeah, I can see where you're coming from, but I don't think Christians are persecuted nearly as much as they think they are. And
I agree with you. Let's add
that to our 8th spin-off episode now.
Right. I completely agree with you. I will say this: Christians are, without a doubt, the most persecuted people in the world. I think in the United States, we have a cakewalk. No, listen, hear me out. That's demonstrable. In the United States, it's a cakewalk. It's easy here. We're hardly persecuted at all here in the United States. You want to talk about worldwide, how many Christians every day are being slaughtered? Look it up. I'm not talking about here in America. I'm talking about in communist China. I'm talking about in Iran. I'm talking about in places that will get you imprisoned and or killed for sharing the gospel.
Right.
They are
and today,
the most persecuted in the world.
And today, well, that's because as far as numbers are concerned, yeah, because there's more of you than there are Jews. I think the Jews would argue that maybe they've had a rougher time. I'm not saying in all of history. I'm saying right now in history, of all the people, demographic groups that are alive today, sex, religions, worldviews, whatever, Christians are the most persecuted. I'm not. Listen, I live in luxury. Right. Compared to other people. Please, podcast world, hear me when I say that I have an amazing, easy ride in the United States. Christians in America have no idea what persecution is really like. None. I'd be curious to see some actual numbers there.
I will be happy. It's demonstrable. I'd be happy to show you.
Gay communities would maybe have a say, a different there. I know that.
So gays are being slaughtered by the thousands every day?
Yeah. They're being thrown off of buildings.
Okay. I will demonstrably show. Next podcast, we're going to have to do like a instant replay. So I can show you the stats.
All right.
Listen, I'm not saying that is... that's something like a point for Jamie. Like I said, I have it easy here. I'm just saying that a lot of people don't realize how many Christians are killed every day, not because they're breaking the law per se. It's not like they're going out and throwing rocks at cops, you know what I'm saying, or something like that, or they're misbehaving and that's why they're getting killed. But they're getting killed simply by either meeting together so they could share their faith with each other, or trying to proselytize. And I mean, China is burning churches down to the ground and killing everyone who's inside. I mean, this is happening all over the world, except for here in America, where we have a nice little bubble. Temporarily.
Well, let's commit to looking into that. Maybe we can even spin and have a whole separate episode on that.
Number 9.
Let's add that to the list. Okay. Yeah. So, on a lighter note,
much lighter note, yes.
Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah, okay. What about him? Yeah.
Former Fox News guy. I guess he had a show, right? Until
it was popular
up
for
until
a little
recent.
While.
And so
he sexually harassed people, I think.
Well, yeah, I didn't want to go there. You're the one who brought that up.
I think that's what happened. So I mean,
it definitely
is what it is, man.
But that's a side issue that's separate from his war on Christmas, right? So what's your take on the war on? You told me before that you thought I would be surprised with your take on the war on Christmas.
Again,
so I'm curious as to what you think about that.
I take a stance of, personally, if I'm trying to be super objective about this, it probably feels a lot like a war on Christmas to a lot of Christians, because what we used to be able to do, with freedom, we can no longer do in the name of inclusion. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying people wanting to take the 10 Commandments down. We used to be able to hang those for wherever we wanted to. People, not allowed to have this or talk about that or put this here, or put that there. And again, I'm talking about government and, so
we've matured. We've come to recognize that there's other people. Our population becomes more diverse, and so we start to care more about other people. Yeah. So
make whatever conclusions you want to about that. That I'm saying that
I agree. There was a day when you could do that kind of stuff without worrying about.
Now that those kind of things are being taken away, it appears as if we're being picked on, right? So I could see why Christians would see that.
Yes.
However, so I will say there are some things that justifiably, I think it goes overboard. Like we talked about earlier, like really we can't sing the song because it says Merry Christmas or Jesus in it, or like really, like, so I think some of those things it's going too far. But for the most part, I don't think there's a war on Christmas. I think that it appears to be, from our perspective, because of the idea of inclusion. So you can't do this now because we're going to try to include everyone. And so you're out.
I think that's a fair view.
Man, chalk it up.
And let me give you, in that vein, sometimes, when we're eating dinner here with the kids and we like to, put on a show, like, have the TV on or something. And lately, we've been watching Bob's Burgers. You ever watch Bob's Burgers? You ever heard of that?
No. Is that on like Food Channel?
No, it's on. We're watching it on one of the streaming. I can't remember what exactly we watch it on, but it's a show. It's a an animated show, and kind of in the veins of like The Simpsons kind of thing. Right. His family always kind of gets in trouble, and they have to deal with stuff, and they got these different personalities in their family. But that's besides the point here. My point was that so sometimes, like Adler will come, he says, "I want to watch this," or Kaylee will say, "I want to watch this," and what I say to them is, "There's plenty of shows that we all want to watch." Okay, there are solutions where we are all happy. So I'm not taking away your show because so that you can't do it. I'm saying that there are things that we all want to do, right? And so if somebody says, "Let's not sing "Oh Come All Ye Faithful," because we can sing Jingle Bells, right? Because there are Christmas songs that are not of a religious bent and that are more inclusive. And it's not saying you can't sing that religious song as much as it's saying there are plenty of songs that are inclusive of everyone. If we want to, if we want this to be a time of brotherhood and sharing and that kind of thing, that's a better way to do it. Okay. Now, I think your point of view is legit here. I think that I don't agree that that's what's happening, but I can certainly understand how somebody might feel that way. Okay. And so, but I did want to say, I did want to bring up, by the way, I wasn't all that surprised by your take on the war on Christmas, by the way.
Dang it.
You didn't catch me there. But I wanted to bring up, so something that today was on Fox and Friends, that ever inclusive show there. Dennis Prager, I'm sure you've heard of him. Dennis Prager's radio talk show host and so forth.
Orthodox Jew. Yeah.
Yep. And so he said, Orthodox Jew. And so he said, "I'm deeply worried about the radical secularization of America, and the obvious arena, the most obvious perhaps, is changing Christmas into holiday. Kids no longer have Christmas vacation, holiday vacation. Companies no longer have Christmas parties, holiday parties. And of course, it's happy holidays, not Merry Christmas." And so just the way that he's phrasing that, he's saying, it's exactly what you were talking about. none of what he said was a negative thing about him or his beliefs. Saying a holiday party is not excluding Christmas. Saying, a holiday vacation for the kids is not excluding Christmas.
Yeah, but when it was
right.
something and it's being taken away, that's like, so it's not like, hey, we're sitting down to eat and now we're all going to decide which TV channel to watch, and there's a certain channel that we all like. It is, I'm sitting at the table and I'm watching something on TV that I like, and you guys come to the table and one of you doesn't like what we're watching, so now we have to change the channel. So I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying I'm in the right.
We're changing it to a channel that we all like.
Right, but what I'm saying is it's not what you said earlier was not analogous. So it's not like we're sitting down and we're now going to just decide, what we want to do or what channel are we going to all watch? No. I was watching TV on a certain station first at the table.
Right.
Y'all joined in and now decided to change things up. Again, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying from the perspective of the Christian, it's not just, we're going to something neutral. No. It's taking from us.
No, it's not taking anything from you. Christmas is a holiday. If somebody says happy holidays to you, that includes Christmas as much as any other holiday.
Right.
It's
we're not the idea behind it. It's the idea behind it. The idea behind it is we're not going to celebrate Christmas anymore. We're going to celebrate all of the things.
We're not going to. That's wrong. Okay. We're not saying we're not going to celebrate Christmas anymore. We're saying we're not just going to celebrate Christmas anymore.
Right. And that's why I brought up the analogy of sitting at the dinner table. It's not like we're starting from scratch. I was watching something at the table.
Right.
And then you guys got here and you decided to change it.
We're still going to watch something that you want, but we're also going to watch something that we all want.
But do you see how that appears to us?
Right.
To be like we're losing ground.
Right. It appears that way.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
It appears that way, yeah. So
I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying
it's just you were used to getting your way when you were watching TV. Right.
Well, listen, I'm not making or drawing any conclusions other than the fact that, it's not this neutrality. To us, thinks it's being removed.
It seems that way to you. Yes.
Well, it is, and it still might be including us in a way.
As much as it was before.
No.
It's just including
you. Then we would just keep saying Merry Christmas.
Well, you would think
but it's
you
not,
can. You can still say Merry Christmas.
Yeah. No, not if you're working in a public building.
Not as a government employee. As a government representative, you can't. But that's my point. But that's not saying.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
That's not you can't say Christmas. That's not you can't say Christmas, right?
Well, I can't
as soon as that postal employee goes home, they can say Merry Christmas all they want.
Well, sure, right. That's always been the case, but it also has always been the case.
So the only thing that they
could say Merry Christmas, but now it's not.
So in the past,
things are being taken away from us. I'm not saying that it's wrong that this is happening and that we're including it now. What I'm saying is that we did have rights in the past that are now are no longer.
The thing that's being taken away from you is the right to exclude others. That's what's being taken away.
Does it sound ridiculous to say that about Merry Christmas?
No, because it's 100% accurate.
Well, right, and that's why we have these discussions, because I understand. I understand things like the nativity scene not being on public grounds, but something as little as Merry Christmas. Again, if that's a little thing, then it shouldn't matter. Then there shouldn't be that big of a deal for you to include everybody, rather than just Christians. Just take a bunch of little stuff away from you too. After a while, the little things add up, and you go, "Hey, wait a second here."
No, you're the one who said it was a little thing.
Right, I know. And then what I'm saying though is, and you're basically saying, well, if it's a little thing, then it shouldn't be a big deal to you. And what I'm saying is after time, a bunch of little things then tend to add up.
But there's nothing actually being taken away.
Except for, yes, I can't say Merry Christmas.
You can, just not as a representative of the government.
Right. So that's being taken away.
But you can
we
still
used to be able to do
you
it.
Can
and
still
now we can't.
you can still wish people a Merry Christmas, but you say it in a way that's not exclusive of other people.
I can't say Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays.
So that is being taken
if you
away.
say Happy Holidays, you are wishing somebody to have a Merry Christmas.
I'm not wishing it the way I want to as Merry. Listen, you have to admit,
you can't say it the way that you want to. Yeah, I agree with that.
Like, I can't say Merry Christmas. Right. That seems completely ridiculous to me.
Oh, well, it's not. Because you're a Christian.
Okay, well,
you're a Christian.
Let's move on.
That's why it doesn't seem ridiculous to you. If it's a big deal, then it should be. Then it's a big deal from the other side too. If it's not a big deal, then why make a big deal about it? If it's if it's a small, tiny little thing that you're asking for, then
listen, I don't care. I don't care about most of this stuff. I just spent the majority of this podcast saying it doesn't bother me.
Right, but that Merry Christmas, that just sticks in your craw.
It's not. Well, it's kind of the idea, and I think you understand what I'm trying to say. Like, that you can at least see where I'm coming from.
Right, I do.
Like really?
I told you that I thought that was a legit point of view, but what I'm saying is that it's a biased point of view. And I'm not saying that just Christians are biased. I'm just saying Christians that have been the majority since the beginning of this country have gotten used to having their way in certain things. And now when they're asked to let other people sit at the table too, they're losing their area of the table by being forced to share with other people.
Can we
Is that
move
a bad
on
thing?
to like where we can we move on to where we like
No, this was the lighter conversation right now.
No. I want to get to our inclusive. Christmas is inclusive.
Right. Let me say there was a couple other things I wanted to say because you mentioned that Dennis Prager was a Jew, and so I wanted to point out. So this was something that I found when I was looking into this War on Christmas thing, and this is from a pamphlet published in 1920s by a publishing company owned by Henry Ford of the Ford Motor Company, and it was called. The International Jew, the World's Foremost Problem. All right. So that was the name of the pamphlet. And it says, people sometimes ask why 3 million Jews can control the affairs of 100 million Americans in the same way that 10 Jewish students can abolish the mention of Christmas and Easter out of schools containing 3,000 Christian pupils. Okay. So nowadays they're saying that, it's the secularist war on Christmas. In the 1920s, they were talking about the Jewish faith was impinging.
Well, if all you people would stop worrying on Christmas, we'd be all right.
But there's more. Okay, here's from a pamphlet published by the John Birch Society in 1959 called "There Goes Christmas." The UN fanatics launched their assault on Christmas in 1958, but too late to get very far before the holy day was at hand. They are already busy, however, at this very moment on efforts to poison the 1959 Christmas season with their high-pressure propaganda. What they now want to put over on the American people is simply this. Department stores throughout the country are to utilize UN symbols, United Nations symbols, and emblems as Christmas decorations. So my point there is that it's not, this isn't anything that's new. Okay. It's not something it's the perspective on this is that, boy, they're chipping away at Christmas. And again, I can see that. I can understand that perspective. And please don't think that I'm saying you're just being a whiny little baby. Okay. That's not what I'm saying at all. Okay. What I'm saying is that, yes, if you're in a privileged position and then some of that privilege is taken away from you, it feels like something is being taken away from you that like, hey, that was mine. You get used to it. And when it's not there, look at how much we complain about how long it's taking our computers to start up. It took 30 seconds for my phone to start up. Do you know how long I was in junior high?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do know how long because I remember the stupid the sound it would make. I had a Tandy 800.
Okay, yeah.
Remember the Tandies where it was like Space Quest? You remember Space Quest?
I don't remember Space Quest, but I imagine I played it.
It's a great game. So,
but yeah, so you start up the computer.
It took 2 days.
You go off and do something else, and then you come back, right?
That's right. Yeah, you do. Yeah.
But now, since we're so used to instant feedback, as soon as my phone takes 5 seconds to load a web page, I'm like, why is this thing taking so long? I feel it too, okay?
Right.
It's not just Christians. It's just that we happen to be talking about a Christian thing at this moment. Okay?
Right.
So anyway. So we've covered all the Christmas as a divider topics there. Let's talk about Christmas as an includer. Okay? Let's talk about Christmas as an includer.
People.
And I already talked about my family traditions and how again, it could be just my imagination, but it really seems like my family has kind of adapted to be welcoming to me. I don't. Yeah,
to their credit.
And it's not just my parents too. It's my greater family as well. And so, kudos to my family for really making me feel welcome when it could have gone drastically wrong. But to me, that's what Christmas is all about. To me, that's what Christmas is about, a time when people can come together and be together and have a feast together and hang out together and tell stories and talk about this, that, and the other thing. And I wanted to bring up one thing here. And this is, it's been a tradition for me for the last few years. And have you ever heard of Tim Minchin? Tim Minchin, he's a musician.
Can't say as I have.
Well, he's a musician. He's an atheist musician, and he has a song called "White Wine in the Sun," and that is something. And it's a song. It's about his perspective on Christmas. The song is about how he doesn't really go into all the church stuff. He doesn't. It's not to him. It's not about commercialization, and to him, it's about being with his family. He's Australian,
right,
or New Zealand, I think Australian. And so his family celebrates, December is summertime down under, right?
Mm-hmm.
From being in Minnesota, it's hard for me to imagine December.
Right.
But, so
there's a thing called the sun, and it comes out and melts all the snow.
You mean what? It's not just gray the whole world over?
Right,
no. And so the song is about how that's something that's very important to him. And in the song, he sings about, I like to celebrate Christmas. I like Christmas, and this is what it means to me. It's not about Jesus. It's not about buying gifts. He actually talks about how he regrets that people have commercialized Jesus to a point, to sell products and that kind of thing. And but he says, what he looks forward to is that, so he's a musician now, he travels all over the world. And so, but in Christmas time, he goes back and he hangs out with his family and they drink white wine in the sun. So that's what the song's about. And so that, to me, that's what really symbolizes Christmas. It's a time for me to spend time with my friends and my family here, for me to think about my friends that are not here, and, that kind of thing. Why don't you, what's some of your family traditions that really mean a lot to you as far as Christmas is concerned?
Growing up, I know towards at least my high school years. Well, I guess grade school, we go over to my grandpa and grandma Goodlet's, and we'd have Christmas Eve over there, open up a bunch of gifts, and then as I got older in high school, we did more.
Did you have a program?
No program.
No program. Okay.
Listen, this is nuts. I remember and I think this is when I became an adult. Okay, so distinctly remember the one year going to my grandparents on Christmas Eve, and all I wanted to do was open up gifts. I couldn't believe we had to wait till after dinner. I hated dinner.
We always had to wait till after church.
I just wanted to open the gifts. Forget dinner. We could eat dinner later. Then the next year, I could give two rats about the gifts. All I wanted was that honey baked ham that my grandma made, and my aunt made this macaroni and cheese, like with the cheese baked on top. It's just amazing. I couldn't. Distinctly remember that separation, going from caring about the gifts to now caring about the food. But we used to do that on Christmas Eve, and then as I got older, we used to go. Actually cut our own tree, so we did that several years in a row. And now, what I think is so awesome, the last 4 years since we've been here in Columbus, the church I attend here, Trinity Assembly of God, we have a candlelight service for Christmas Eve. And we get these things called luminaries. Basically, it's just
it's like a sword,
milk
right?
jugs. No.
Oh, okay. Oh,
no, not a sword.
I thought you meant like the candles with the little plastic circles on them, or the little paper circles.
Those. But
right.
The swords. Yeah, I get it now.
Right.
They kind of do look
so
like
they got a little shield guard on it.
We have these plastic milk jugs. You fill up a third of the way with sand.
Oh,
and then
right.
You put candles in them, and we set them out all over the property.
Yeah.
There's like 400 of these things. And then we have this giant Christmas tree that is on the platform, all decorated in white, and we put lights on the candles on the inside, and we do candlelight service on Christmas Eve, and it is spectacular. I wouldn't miss it for the world. We all love it. Our pastor does a drama that night. He's terrific. He studied theater in college, along with being in the seminary, and so he does drama, and it's just terrific. So that's some of the stuff that we do. Of course, we do a lot of the commercialized stuff too. We go look at Christmas lights, and we go shopping, and we do the Santa bit. And
do you ever do the caroling thing? You ever like go around caroling?
Well,
I never really understood
goes
that.
To nursing homes.
Oh, okay.
We go to nursing homes, and they just went this last Wednesday. The younger kids went to the nursing home, and they sang carols for some of the elderly there. Some of them aren't going to have anybody come visit them during the holidays, and so I know they particularly look forward to when we come. And we have a monthly thing where we go into the nursing home and do stuff for them, have a little service and do some other things. So they do that, and but for a long time, in between my leaving my home as a teenager, I guess, like getting out of high school and having a family of my own, I didn't do much in the way of celebrating Christmas because I was working as a fireman and a young guy. A lot of times I was tasked with.
You got a job as a young guy?
Well,
does that make you get good pay being a young guy?
Young guy, yeah. Well, yes, a young guy is a position on the fire department.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I had no whiskers, is what they say. Kid, you don't have any whiskers yet. You got to work the.
And what did you say? Something about Phil Flarn, or what was your word again?
Phil Flarn.
You said
Mother Huncher.
Mother Huncher. That's the one.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So I would get stuck working Christmas because all the other guys older, they got families. They would be home with their.
Right.
So I didn't really get the chance to celebrate Christmas in that kind of traditional sense. Christmas morning, wake up, have the coffee, the presents under the tree, things like that. And now actually I'm kind of I have the chance to do that now the last few years. So it's been been nice just spending time here with my family. And of course I got to go and I do family stuff with my wife's side, and then I do family stuff. We do family stuff with my side of the family. So a lot of family stuff. Nothing in stone as far as tradition goes. Like I said earlier, we try to keep it focused around what we believe is the real reason, regardless of whether it's pagan or whatever. We focus on the fact that God came to us as a man, and so that is the reason we celebrate.
All right. That's not a surprise.
Right. I hope
I don't think that's a big surprise there. As the last little bit here, though, and talking about Christmas as an includer, I want to tell a short little story. I'm starting to sound like my dad now. I just want to tell you a little story. I just saw this in the newspaper the other day.
This is part of the podcast
program. See,
program, right? Yeah.
It's ingrained in me, right? It's ingrained in me. No, but this is I heard about this on. Now, on a podcast. It's not an atheist or skeptic podcast. This is a podcast called Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. You ever heard of that? Yeah. Hardcore History?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
No.
He's just a fascinating historian. I mean, he takes these, like he had the 6-part series on World War I, and it was just fascinating. I was never much of a history buff. I was always, the math and the science and, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd read Cliff Notes for my English papers and history was always my weak point. But he's just, I totally admire and respect and am in awe of his ability as an educator to bring these stories to life. And so it's really fascinating. And I heard somewhere that he doesn't script it out, and that makes it even more amazing. But anyway, so he did this little thing on World War I. And one of the stories that he was talking about was the Christmas truce. The Christmas truce. And this is something that happened during World War I. It was in 1914. And right about that time, the Pope at this time was Pope Benedict XV, not our most recent Pope Benedict, obviously. And so the Pope had suggested that they should have a ceasefire during the war for Christmas, for the holiday. And but neither side was having any of it. And so they were just going to keep on going. But then the men in the field decided, you know what, screw that. And so, this was during the time of like trench warfare and stuff, brutal stuff. Right. And the Germans decided, they just got up out of their trenches. They set down their weapons and they started walking towards the enemy's lines. And their enemies decided, well, let's go with it.
Gun them down while we have the chance.
that was their first inclination, but then they didn't do it. And instead they set down their guns and they got up and they hung out and they all got together and they wished each other Merry Christmas in each other's languages. And they sang songs together and they exchanged gifts and so forth. And they just kind of had a general time.
Shut up, dude. This isn't real.
This is totally real.
Are you serious?
Serious. I'm totally serious.
I've never heard this before.
Oh, then you gotta go to see.
Oh, why isn't this a movie?
Well, it probably was at some point.
That would be a pretty cool movie.
But and it's not just a Christmas thing. It's it had happened in other locations at different times too. But it was like Christmas was like the excuse that it's like the men were looking for an excuse to get along, to not have to fight. And so it was a perfect setting. It was, both sides celebrated this holiday and they got up and then, and they also used the time to remove the bodies, the dead, of their dead fallen comrades and, pull them back into their lines and stuff. But, they just kind of, let's just be civil towards each other. And it's hard for me to imagine something like that happening nowadays. But it was just, to me, it was just like, I had the same reaction to you. I was like, why didn't they tell us this before? And,
that's really, really cool.
Yeah, it is amazing. So, it just goes to show you that, and this is I'm summing up the whole evening with my moral of the story voice. But it just goes to show you that, we do, we are a social species and we want to be together. We want to, we want to enjoy each other's company. We want to have meaningful relationships with each other. And so it's nice that we have holidays, even though obviously there are points of contention with the minutia. But even after, you and I we've had worse, right?
We've had far worse, bro.
But, we're still laughing and we're still friends at the end of the show. And so, to me, to me, that's what this whole season is really about. It's the idea of just being together and what, I'll stand quietly if you want to say a prayer and you will honor my wishes by not expecting me to participate. And, I'm cool with that. And if somebody else wants to have an airing of grievances or whatever they do for Festivus, the wrestling, didn't they do some kind of feats of strength, right? Feats of strength. You had to wrestle George's dad. Strength. That's it. And, whatever you want to do, that's cool. And so I don't know. Do you have a final word you want to say on the?
No, that's terrific. No, I think we should end on that.
That sounds good.
And there is Christmas. Everything you wanted to know every answer.
It's a little different than I remembered as a child. It wasn't.
You're right. Every
it
question
wasn't quite
answered.
the same.
And you should be walking away feeling completely intellectually and spiritually satisfied. So that's what the God or Not podcast does for our listeners.
I want to, speaking of that, I want to bring something up here. And that is, do you remember when I was telling you about stuff that we did with our kids? We took books and art supplies to the children's hospital and stuff. And you said, what are they doing now? What are they doing this year? And I said, I don't think we're doing anything. I totally forgot. We are.
Oh, great. What is it?
This was something that we started back in April, and we said, okay, from now until the end of the year. So we're runners in our family. We like to run to exercise. We like to get out and enjoy the wonderful Minnesota summers.
Does Lori know you're on drugs? That's crazy. I only run for my life.
It's just the runner's high, man. Just the runner's high, and Lori's right there with me doing it. But we committed to all four of my son and my daughter. My son's on the cross country team on his high school team, and my daughter runs she's on the track team for her middle school team. And so we decided that the four of us were going to pick a charity, and then every mile that we ran between April and up to the end of the year, then we would give $1 to that person to make it like a little,
very cool,
like a little motivational thing to get us out there running.
Oh,
and so,
cool.
So that's what we did this year.
Hey, I also have a small addendum to our discussion. Okay. I do want to affirm the virgin birth. Okay, I was thinking about our conversation, and I do affirm the virgin birth. I just don't necessarily think the virgin birth is something that you must believe in order to be saved. Right. So it's not a primary issue, although it's close. But when we were talking about the virgin birth, and I said, well, listen, that doesn't really matter to me. What I was saying was gotcha. Like, hey, I'm more interested in more of the bigger issues, the secondary and tertiary. But I wanted to affirm the virgin birth. So,
all right, you're on the record.
I don't want to get in trouble with any of my.
That's pretty much what I thought
friends.
you meant, but we want to make sure that it's clear. We want to make sure that your position's clear. Yep. Okay.
Well, let's. So what do we got now? We got the. Okay, so in this bit, the crowd goes wild. We have some listener feedback, and so we're going to talk about that. So let's get going with that.
And the crowd goes wild.
Okay, crowd goes wild. Here we are. We have some listener feedback. So, as I said earlier, I've really been getting my face kicked in by atheists, and I'm a glutton for punishment because not only do I take some of their emails and, of course, we correspond, but then we become friends on Facebook because that's the next thing you do when you have two completely different worldviews. Why not be friends on Facebook so every single thing I post gets beat up and thrown to the wolves? So,
well, you brought that on yourself. So
I did, but I will say we have probably our first listener from across the pond. We have Michael from New Zealand. Now,
gotcha.
Michael and I have been corresponding. The first was an email, and then we started corresponding via Facebook and via Messenger. And so we have a few things that we're going to go through some of his message and dissect a little bit. So let me read you the first section here, and then
I just have one request while we're doing this.
Yeah.
When you're reading his stuff, can you do it with a New Zealand accent?
No. I wish I could, but I can't do that. So here we go. This is Michael from New Zealand. He says, I thought that the discussion with Scott was good on a philosophical level, but I don't think that either of you actually gave your real life position on the subject. He thinks it would be great to hear where we stand on the subject beforehand, before we get too deep into the philosophical aspects of, into the weeds.
This was in reference to the episode on abortion rights.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So his thought is, hey, maybe right from the start, maybe be a little more clear on maybe what we're defending or what position we're on.
Right.
So we'll keep that in mind as we move through that, Michael. I appreciate the some of the feedback there. So we're talking, Michael and I talking about some of the issues concerning abortion. And one of the things he says is the right wing in particular is generally pro-life. But it doesn't seem that when it comes to supporting a parent after the birth of a child, you can't force a woman to term and then abandon her. So his thought is a criticism that is raised a lot towards the pro-lifers, this idea that we're only pro-life as long as you don't kill the baby. Then after that, we jump ship and run. And I think that's a little unfair. I understand what he's saying because the pro-life camp is very, very laser focused in that there's that one thing that we're really championing. But I will say that that's almost like blaming the fire department for not paying your rent too. You come in here and you put out my fire, but you're not going to pay my rent. So the idea is
I don't see the connection there.
No,
Can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah,
I guess what I want to know is the fire department supposed to be paying my rent?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right.
I guess the criticism is that we don't help those after the fact. And first of all, I don't think that's true. And also, I don't think it's necessary. I mean, no one would blame the National Cancer Society because they don't take on you're not helping anybody with diabetes, so you can't, you can't just do cancer. What about people with diabetes? I mean, nobody's really going to level that charge against the American Cancer Society. So it's
at the risk of us spinning off into another hour-long discussion here. I know we're just trying to touch on these topics, but when you sent me this email, I did kind of think along those lines, and so correct me if I'm wrong, but part of your argument is that if there is a child in the womb, then that child's rights to life override the mother's right to choose. Is that
yes?
Kind of in a nutshell. Okay,
yes.
So then, and I don't know. We haven't spoken about this specifically, but I know that it's a right wing, generally a right wing policy to they're against things like universal health care. And the idea is, why should I pay for my neighbor's health care kind of thing? But isn't that kind of the same thing? I mean, because here we have, I mean, even if we set aside the issue of personhood and we agree that it is a person in there, you're saying that person, since it's a life or death issue for them, then their right to the mother's body outweighs the mother's right to her own body. And so how is that different from your next door neighbor who could be dying of some medical condition and can't afford their health care? Then they should be able to come over and take your stuff so that they can get their surgery or their treatment or whatever.
Yeah,
if their right to life outweighs a woman's right to her own body, why doesn't it also outweigh a right to your neighbor's property?
That's a completely different rabbit trail. We're going to have to save that for another time. So
all right,
the reason
so chew on that one, and we'll come back to
the reason is because we could go on that one for hours. Specifically, what he's saying is that we need to be as pro-life outside the womb as inside the womm.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
And to Michael, I say yes and amen. I can get on board with that. And my first thought is that just like that, we're not going to blame the National Cancer Society for not taking on, not championing, diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
The same holds true with the, we could be pro-life, even if we don't have an answer for all the other societal problems out there. Number one, that was my first thought. The second thought is this. We do take care of the women and children after the child is born. For every Planned Parenthood or every entity or subsection facility that does abortions, there's at least 2 facilities that are Christian based that provide all these other things. So they'll provide prenatal stuff and they do after birth stuff. So it's not like we're only championing, we want these children to live, but the very people you see who are doing something about it after the fact are Christian charities. Now, I'm not saying they're the only ones.
He's referring to like legal obligations. So you're not talking about just trying to talk people out of abortion. You want to outlaw it.
Right. And
so that's the discrepancy there, is that you want to have a legal obligation in one case, but then not have the legal obligation in another case.
Again, this could be a rabbit trail, but I don't have the right to go kill somebody. That argument just doesn't follow anywhere else.
Okay, well let's agree let's maybe dip into that again at a different time.
And if you guys are looking for abortion take 2, that's coming. Trust me, that's coming. So Michael goes on to say, so we had this exchange, and then he goes on to say, he talks a little bit about this idea that we might not ever change each other's mind. That he suspects that won't happen. But he appreciates our civil discourse, and he appreciates the fact that we understand what we believe and why we believe it, and that he says you never know, you may change someone's mind. Although he hopes that we don't change any atheist minds, with the little LOL and smiley emoji. So, into that, I could wholeheartedly get on board and say that even though I think that you're entrenched in a position and I'm entrenched in a position, I think both of us believe we're in that position for a good reason. We're not uneducated on the topic. We think we have good reasons to be there. And until reasons come that are some kind of defeater for the reasons we already have, we're going to continue to maintain that position. Although I know I could speak for you, and of course I could speak for myself and say that we are both open to the truth, whichever road that we go down.
Well, we try to be. We try to be. We are human beings after all, right?
Well, we have our biases and things like that.
But we try. We try. That's a start. That's step one.
Right. We want truth. We know that can't come from screaming back and forth. Although I know I do get worked up. It's just my personality. But we both want, at the end of the day, both Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, atheists and Christians, all want the same thing at the end of the day. And that's a better life for ourselves and our neighbors. And we just have different ways of getting there. And sometimes we look at each other's position and go, how on earth can you get there holding that position or holding this position? But the only way that we're going to be able to work with each other is to try to listen and understand each other. And Michael understands that. And we've been having some pretty good, dialogues on Facebook threads too, with regards to all kinds of other issues as well. So he goes on to say and talks about how he thinks it's important.
Before we move on there, I want to disagree with Michael a little bit there. One is that you've already changed my mind on one thing. At least that comes to mind right now, and that is we've talked about this, but when we had our talk about faith, you convinced me that that your position on faith was a reasonable alternative. Now, I didn't swing entirely to that side and say this has to be it, but at least I saw your perspective on it, and I've actually defended your perspective more than once on the internet when other people were talking about faith. So saying that we can't change each other's minds, well, debunked already. Now,
and I think he was saying he just doesn't. He thinks on those big positions,
right?
You know,
right. But still, you know, it's a start.
Right,
It's
and I think
progress,
I think too. You'll find, Michael, that we're going to have one of our little side bits where I talk a little bit about evidence and some of the things that I've learned about evidence during the course of our discussions. And so that also could kind of be deemed as maybe not changing my mind as much as my learning some new things and kind of trying to wrestle with some new information. So
right.
You can look forward to that. But he continues. We continued this abortion talk, you know, through several messages. He goes on to say that he thinks it's important that we're careful about, like state and federal, not mandating bans on abortion because not everyone will hold our position. And I went back and forth with him and said, listen, if we agree,
he was saying if you don't like abortions, don't have one, kind of thing.
Don't make it illegal. Yeah, right. You shouldn't make it illegal because that's and I think something that I had brought up in our discussion, he and I had mentioned, okay, well, you don't like slavery, don't have a slave. This idea is if something is wrong, it's morally wrong and it should be outlawed, then it should be outlawed. There's no, when it comes to abortion, there is no, hey, I wouldn't have an abortion because I think it's murder, but you can have an abortion if you want. I don't want to I don't want to not allow you to murder somebody. So for us, the position is if we're able to determine that this is a human being and they have rights and that those rights supersede those rights of the woman, then we should have a federal mandate. Because we should outlaw the intentional murdering of human beings. Now, having said that, that's the case that has to be made.
Right.
But my position was if we can make that case, then we should be mandating.
The difference comes a little bit earlier in the discussion. You know,
right.
the disagreement is not at that point. The disagreement is earlier on.
Right. And if that other point could be addressed, then it's the same as these other overarching kind of moral laws that have to do with murder or rape or anything else. But again, like you said, Scott, those are the things that you have to, those are the discussions we have to get in. We have to make that case.
Right.
Then the last thing he talked about too was the separation of church and state. He said he's not sure whether or not we have it on our topic list. We do, Michael. We do. Separation of church and state. But he would love for us to have
we addressed it a little bit in the Christmas discussion we just had.
We did. And I know that we do have that on the docket as one of the things to discuss. So, Michael, we will definitely be talking about that because I think that's an important discussion to have as well, because that covers multiple avenues, freedom of speech and also freedom of other people's rights to not be infringed upon in other ways as well. So, definitely
so keep listening.
Yes, keep listening because we are definitely going to hit these topics. So that's pretty much our discussion. I do want to say thank you, Michael, for being my friend on Facebook and for messaging me and holding my feet to the fire. I have a few of you guys now that do that on a regular basis, and I love to hate it or hate to love it. I'm not sure which, but I appreciate his cordialness and his willingness to discuss, like we do, these topics that, and I'm finding more and more people say, hey, just you keep your religion to yourself. I don't want to hear from you. Well, then you shouldn't then unfriend me. Like what do you want me to do? Unfollow me. You know what?
Right.
I mean, I'm not forcing you. Just sit in a room and listen to me. They'll listen to me talk. And so I'm finding a lot of people.
I was just telling you that you brought it on yourself. Well, that applies to other people too.
Right. That's right.
That's part of the package of taking an interest in interacting with people that are different than you is, hey, guess what? When you get there, they're going to be different than you.
Yeah. And you're going to have to put up with their crap. And, and it's like, so I've been finding more people that are on the opposite end of the spectrum where they don't want to deal with any of this. They think it's kind of all either a waste of time or, I mean, they all have their reasons. So it's nice to get someone like Michael who's willing to talk about these things, even though they're not easy to talk about.
And without being a jerk too.
Yeah, exactly. So that's Michael from New Zealand. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate
New Zealand.
Your thoughts.
I want to go there someday. It just looks so beautiful there.
Yeah, is that down under? Or is that Australia?
Well, I mean, down under just refers to the southern hemisphere, right? And so, so it's kind of in that area.
All right, it's like Michael from down under.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michael.
And if not, Michael, send us an email and we'll correct me.
Time. Yeah.
Yes.
There wouldn't be any normal, like any other email.
Come at me, bro.
Yeah. What you got? All
right. Thank you, Michael.
And that about wraps it up for episode number 10. Please send us your ideas, your questions, and your comments to email at godornotpodcast.com. If you'd like to know more about the topics covered in this episode, Scott recommends
The Atheist's Guide to Christmas. And this is a book. It's edited by Robin Harvey and Stephanie Meyers. And basically it's a collection of short stories and essays and little mini chapters kind of thing. And they've collected little stories from a variety of different atheist writers, and they've collected, and it's just all Christmas related, like family stuff, and just how do you celebrate Christmas and so on, and how to navigate a hostile environment in a Christmas setting, and just all kinds of different things. How you can talk to your kids about Christmas, and so there's a collection of little tidbits, kind of like what we were doing today in our Christmas talk. And so that's The Atheist's Guide to Christmas, edited by Robin Harvey and Stephanie Meyers.
Very good. And I am recommending Hijacking the Historical Jesus by Phil Fernandes and Kyle Larson. That's Hijacking the Historical Jesus by Phil Fernandes and Kyle Larson. Phil Fernandes is one of the first apologist pastors that I got to know on Facebook and through his podcast, and he's just absolutely terrific, down to earth. And his book on hijacking the historical Jesus talks. There's a little bit in there about the birth, but I find it interesting around Christmas time to talk about Jesus, since that's what I think. It's the reason we celebrate Christmas. So, hijacking the historical Jesus by
we being you,
we being Christians, right?
Right.
I'm not. Come on.
I know. I have to put up a token. I have to get upset about something here. Damn it!
Right, okay. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that you'll be back with us next time when Scott and I will be talking about objectivity in morality. That's objectivity in morality. Until then, this is your dialectic duo reminding you to talk to each other.
See you next year.
This has been the God or Not podcast. Send your questions or comments to email at godornotpodcast.com. If you'd like to support the show or grab some God or Not gear, please visit the website at www.godornotpodcast.com. Thanks for listening.